NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of the hour. BBC Director General Tim Davie praises the network's journalists as he steps down amid accusations of bias and legal threats from Donald Trump. Davie says he is very proud of the BBC's reporting despite broadcasters' deepening leadership crisis. UNICEF says Israel is denying entry of essential supplies like syringes and baby bottles into Gaza, hindering relief operations. The agency warns its mass children's vaccination drive is stalled as 1.6 million syringes and solar fridges remain stuck in customs since August. The US Senate passes a compromise bill to end the longest government shutdown in American history after weeks of political deadlock. The measure restores funding and delays President Trump's workforce cuts until January, now awaiting approval in the House. The Pakistani Taliban says it carried out the suicide attack that killed 12 people outside a court in Islamabad. The group claims it targeted judicial officials and warned of more strikes until Islamic Sharia law is fully implemented. While speaking in Bhutan, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has stressed that conspirators behind the Delhi blast will not be spared, even as the motive of the blast has not been confirmed. He has emphasized that security agencies are working round the clock to find the culprits. A Russian commander says his forces have pushed deep into Ukrainian city of Kupiansk and seized several train stations. He adds that troops have also taken control of an oil depot in the city's eastern edge. Iraqis head to the polls to elect a new 329-member parliament with Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani seeking a second term. Many voters remain sceptical of change, seeing the election as favouring established parties that control the country's oil wealth. Israel's parliament approves the first stage of a bill backed by Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir to impose the death penalty on Palestinians convicted of killing Israelis. The bill passed its initial vote 39-16, with supporters saying it would deter attacks and prevent future prisoner deals. Now we start with some updates on the Delhi blast that occurred last night at around 7 p.m, which has seen 12 people killed. We have reactions coming in from world leaders, and Japanese Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi has expressed deep sorrow over the tragic loss of lives in the recent blast outside the Red Fort in Delhi, offering condolences to the victims and their families. In a post on X, Takaichi also conveyed their prayers for the swift recovery to the injured. Following the blast, Indigo issued a travel advisory urging passengers to arrive early for secondary security checks at airports due to heightened security measures. The airline emphasized that passengers should expect delays as security procedures are intensified. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Home Affairs has officially handed over the investigation of the blast to the National Investigation Agency. Home Minister Amit Shah assured that all those involved in the attack would face the full wrath of India's security agencies. The NIA, which has been involved with local police since the blast, has formally begun taking over the case. We will, of course, bring you the updates of that developing story when we get them here on NewsX World. Moving on now and staying in South Asia. And the Pakistani Taliban terror group, otherwise known as the TTP, has now claimed responsibility for a suicide bombing that killed 12 people in Islamabad earlier in the day. The group stated in a message that they had targeted judicial officials, including judges, lawyers, and others who implemented laws that it deemed as un-Islamic. Moreover, the TTP has also threatened further attacks until Islamic Sharia law is implemented in Pakistan. Earlier, we reported that the spokesperson for the TTP, Mohammed Khorasani, has denied any connection to the explosion outside the Islamabad District Court. However, with more updates coming in, it now appears the TTP has in fact claimed responsibility, stating the attack was in response to the court's judgments under Pakistan's un-Islamic laws, as they claim. Now joining us to discuss this situation coming out of Pakistan is Major General R.G.G. Davidi. He's an international relations and defence expert, and he joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much for joining us. What more can you tell us about the Pakistani Taliban and what its aims are and what we can expect from the future?
Well, Thomas, Taliban Pakistan, the outfit, came into being in 2007 with a very clear aims and objectives. Its first objective is to overthrow the government of Pakistan and establish Sharia laws, driven or governed government. So that is the first point of, contention, and they have been engaged in repeated attacks on Pakistan, either on the defense establishment against security forces, and even they have targeted the civilian organizations. And these attacks actually have scaled up after the Taliban returned to power in 2021. And now, as you reported, that they have attacked the judiciary people because they claim that the judiciary is not what they expect and it should be Sharia law based. Now, there are two, three very important issues that needs consideration and merit. Firstly, Pakistan has been claiming that Taliban are being supported by the Taliban across the Afghanistan border, which Taliban across have denied that they are not supporting any of activities of TTP. Secondly, the Taliban Pakistan has also groused that their tribal areas, what were earlier known as FTA, have been merged with Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, which they do not accept. And that is another point of contention or a grouse which the Taliban Pakistan holds. And the most important point is that Pakistan itself has encouraged the terrorist proxy wars, and that is part of the national policy, part of the national doctrine. And today they are getting the taste of their own medicine, because all these groups, what they nurtured, are today acting against themselves. So therefore the lesson is that if you rear snakes in the backyard, then those snakes can bite you some other time. So I think this TTP attacks on Pakistan have been on the increase, and they are expected to keep this tempo going until they are able to either achieve the aim or there are peace talks. And interestingly, number of attempts have been made to
Yes.
get some kind of peaceful solution, but they have not fructified so far. Thomas.
Yes, and how strong is the group? And does Pakistan have the intelligence, of course, the manpower to cope with it, to prevent the future attacks that the group has said it's going to conduct?
Well, this group definitely is a force to reckon with, because they have been successful in carrying out repeated attacks on Pakistan security forces. And Pakistan security forces have suffered heavy losses. And what actually their strength is that they definitely are very battle-hardened groups, because even in Taliban in Afghanistan, they are actually very good. I would say they are very potent and skilled in the ground warfare. And secondly is the ideology, because ideologically they are very deeply embedded, and they are also very deeply married or very deeply linked to their cause. So therefore, two things which actually are their strength is, firstly they are battle hardened, secondly they are ideologically very motivated, and thirdly, well, whether it is accepted or not, they get certain amount of tacit support from across from Afghanistan, because they share the same Deoband ideology. So all I can say is that as far as the unconventional warfare is concerned, Taliban definitely are a force to reckon with, evident from the fact that they had taken a heavy toll of the Pakistan security forces. Thomas.
Yes, Major General Gigi Davidi, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's always a pleasure to get your insight here. We now move on over to Europe for our next story. And Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskiy visited the frontline city of Kherson, which remains under constant attack by Russian drones and artillery. The city, located just a few kilometers from Russian positions across the Dnipro River, faces ongoing bombardment. His visit to Kherson also marks the third anniversary of Russia's withdrawal from the city in 2022. Meanwhile, Russia's defense ministry has confirmed that a temporary ceasefire near the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant has been terminated. This comes after recent escalations near the region. The ministry released footage showing intense fighting on the outskirts of Kupiansk in Ukraine's Kharkiv region, and they claim to have taken full control of the eastern part of the city. Okay, we are, of course, talking about the updates from the Ukraine war, in which the Eastern Front is heating up, particularly in the area of Pavlovsk and the area of Kupiansk. We are talking about a visit which President Zelensky has made to the frontline city of Kherson, which of course remains under constant attack by Russian drones and artillery. The city remains just a few kilometers from the Dnipro River, which was withdrawn from Russian troops in 2022 when Ukraine was taking back land in the war. Of course, this is something that has not been happening as of late, as Russia presses its intense offensive on in the region. The ministry released footage of showing intense fighting on the outskirts of the city of Kupiansk in Ukraine's Kharkiv region. They claim to have taken full control of the eastern part of the city, the Russians, that is. Of course, we will keep you updated as this situation develops and veils as the fight for Ukraine continues into its fourth year. Of course, diplomatically, this war has seen next to no updates over the past days, with President Zelensky still vying for those US Patriots from the United States. And of course, also now we'll see how Donald Trump reacts to that. Now joining us is Alison Mutler. She is the former Associated Press bureau chief, and she joins us live from Bucharest in Romania. Alison, thank you for joining us once again. President Zelenskyy's visit to Kherson, it's been 3 years since the withdrawal from that, from Russia's withdrawal from the Kherson. What message is he trying to send both to Ukrainians here and to Moscow with this visit, particularly, of course, now Moscow is advancing in certain regions more faster than previously?
President Zelensky has deliberately gone there on the third anniversary of Ukraine pushing back Russian troops who'd been trying to get Ukraine to surrender in this important town, to raise Ukrainian morale, to show Ukrainians and the world that Ukraine is still a strong defender of its country, of its territory, and to show that they can repel, they can guard their territory. And it's basically, for the Ukrainians, it's to raise morale and to also remind Ukrainians that this war has been going on for a long time and it's continuing, and he is there to stay. And to Russia, he's telling them, we're going to continue to fight, and you're not going to get an inch of our territory unless you manage to outwit us. So it's a strong message to both Ukrainians, but also to Moscow, as you said, which is digging in its heels. It's very much trying to encircle other areas and are making great efforts in this Provozhsk in eastern Ukraine, huge efforts. And, Zelensky himself said that Russian troops do outnumber Ukrainian troops in that area, and they're fighting quite tactically. They're trying to encircle the area. But as we've seen in these more than 3 years of war, coming up to 4 years of war, Ukrainians are incredibly fierce and determined to defend their territory.
Yes, Alison, and of course we've seen in the background of this visit by President Zelensky, Russia claims fierce fighting near Kupiansk and new advances in Zaporizhzhia. Is Ukraine struggling to sustain these defences amid, of course, these power shortages that have been going on, and also the winter conditions?
Well, Russia is doing everything it can to make gains, to gain more territory, but also to wear down Ukrainian morale, because we know in a war, it's not just the gains you make or the gains you don't make, but it's also how your troops feel, how your defences feel, how the people feel. Do we feel we're still in this fight? Do we feel we can still win it? So that's what Russia is trying to do, both militarily but also psychologically. And they are quite good, Russia, with their hybrid war, with the psychological, the hybrid war that they've been waging against Ukraine. So yes, they are digging in, and as you said, winter's coming. Ukraine is further north than where I live, so it's colder there, and their energy depots are being attacked by Russia. So it's a very, very difficult position for Ukraine to be in. But they are fighting back. It's very hard. You ask me what's happening. It's very hard to know what's happening there, because we hear what the Russians are saying, we hear what the Ukrainians are saying, but we don't really have any independent international reports from the international media or the UN. I saw that the International War Institute said something today that Ukraine is under huge pressure, but it's premature and it's not accurate to say that Russia has conquered some of the areas it is claiming that it has grabbed.
Yes, Alison, do stay with us as we have further updates coming out of Europe. Turkey's defence ministry confirmed the crash of a C-130 military cargo plane near the Georgia-Azerbaijan border. The plane had departed from Azerbaijan and was en route to Turkey when it went down. Search and rescue operations are underway in coordination with Georgian and Azerbaijani authorities. Turkey's Minister of Interior, Ali Lakila, has communicated with his Georgian counterpart regarding the incident. Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev has expressed condolences to Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, mourning the loss of servicemen in the crash. No details have been released so far about the cause of the crash so far or the number of casualties, but video footage aired on Turkish media appears to show the plane spiralling downwards with a trail of smoke until it crashed. Authorities are continuing their investigation. More from Turkey next, and Turkey prosecutors have filed 142 charges against Istanbul's jailed mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu, according to court documents released on November the 11th. İmamoğlu, a prominent critic of President Erdogan, faces charges that could result in a prison sentence of totaling upwards of 2,000 years. The nearly 4,000-page indictment accuses him of crimes including running a criminal organisation, bribery, embezzlement, money laundering, extortion and tender rigging. İmamoğlu, arrested on March the 19th, is described in the indictment as the head of a sprawling crime network allegedly exerting control over it, quote-unquote, like an octopus. His arrest has sparked outrage from the opposition CHP party and led to widespread protests across Turkey. We now move over to the United Kingdom, and the BBC Director General, Tim Davie, says the broadcaster must continue emphasising its role and strength. He acknowledged their mistakes that have cost the organisation, but stressed the need to fight for its journalism, expressing pride in the BBC's work. He emphasised that he's very proud of the broadcaster's journalism 2 days after resigning amid accusations of bias and a legal threat from US President Donald Trump. His resignation, alongside the departure of the BBC's head of news, has thrown the broadcaster into its biggest crisis in decades, dominating headlines in Britain. Despite the turmoil, Davie reassured staff, saying the BBC will thrive and expressing full support for the team. Let's in fact listen in to his statements.
Good morning. Just want to say a couple of things. I'm here to lead and support the BBC. I'm very, very proud of our journalists in this building. They're doing work I think that's incredibly important. I want to thank every one of them. They're doing a wonderful job. Also, everyone across the BBC doing their thing for the UK, and personally, I'm here to lead and support them. The BBC's going to be thriving, and I support every one of the team. I'm very proud of them.
Trump had threatened legal action over the BBC's editing of a 2021 speech, which the broadcaster later admitted was an error of judgment. Alison joins us once again. Alison, of course, these statements come after the BBC has seemingly lost some credibility with some clear edits of Donald Trump's speech. Tim Davie there saying that the BBC won't lose its credibility. Do you think he's right?
Well, the credibility particularly with the Panorama report, where they doctored or they altered in an unjournalistic way Donald Trump's speech was a clear, not just it wasn't a mistake, it was an error of editorial judgment, and it does impact on its credibility. But he has resigned. The top news editor has resigned. They have apologised, and the question will be, how will they deal with things like this in the future? Will they be more careful? I would suspect they would be, for their own reputations, because we know we work in journalism. It all rests on our reputation. It's human to make an error. This was more than just a human error. It was an editorial screw up, if you like. But the question is, have they drawn a line under it? Will they be able to claw back their credibility? I think in the long term they probably will be, as long as they don't make a mistake it's not really a mistake if they don't make an error of judgment of the level that this one was.
Yes, and Alison.
Yeah.
Sorry. Do you think this crisis within the BBC is part of a kind of broader decline in trust towards Western media outlets?
Absolutely. It started with Donald Trump in his first term when he came up with the term fake news, and he began bashing the media, which before Donald Trump was unthinkable. And that idea of the media publishes fake news, it all has an agenda, you can't trust them. We're talking about the legacy media, the mainstream media, has taken off, particularly in the right-wing camp. And now it's perfectly normal to attack journalists. Before, people, officials used to be scared of journalists. Maybe that was a bit unfair. But now it's quite fashionable to attack journalists and get your news from influencers. So there is a much broader picture, and it started with Donald Trump in his first term, and it's continued. And it hasn't just been limited to Donald Trump. It's particularly across the right wing. They say that the legacy media, the mainstream media, is not to be trusted. It peddles a particular political line, and basically it's untrustworthy and not reliable. But that is a political point of view, because if you ask people, well, where did you find out about the government falling? Where did you find about the train crash? Where did you find about the plane crash that you just mentioned? Everyone will have got their news from the BBC or, X News in India or, some other Sky News. So they do still get their news from the mainstream media, but it's more become a political rallying point that we don't trust the media anymore. But it's not actually accurate. It's just a sort of a political point of view, I think, rather than actually accuracy. But the mainstream media, the legacy media is definitely struggling to retain its reputation. But it's not as bad as particularly right-wing politicians and populist politicians would have you believe.
Yes, Alison Butler, thank you very much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to get your 2 cents on these stories. Thank you for taking the time. We now move on for our final story of the hour, and British-Hungarian author David Szilárd has won this year's Booker Prize for his novel Flesh. Judges described it as extraordinary and a very special book. Flesh follows Istvan, an emotionally detached man across different stages of life, from a Hungarian housing estate to London's world of the ultra-rich. Judging panel chair Roddy Doyle praised the book's singularity, calling it dark but joyful. Actress Sarah Jessica Parker joined the panel, while Dua Lipa and Stormzy have championed the novel. Szilárd says he felt a bit dazed after winning, and Stormzy recorded an excerpt from a short film shown at the ceremony. Let's in fact listen in.
This wasn't necessarily a very easy book to write. I started on it just after abandoning another novel. And so there was a very great sense of pressure, as you might imagine, to make this book good, because I think while it might be okay to abandon one novel, to abandon two would be quite difficult for me to deal with psychologically. I think fiction can take risks. I think it's one of the things that it can do. It can take aesthetic risks, formal risks, perhaps even moral risks, which many other forms, narrative forms, can't quite do to the same extent. I think part of the reason for that is just that novels are so relatively cheap to produce. All you need to do is keep one writer supplied with coffee and a few other essentials for a year or two, and you've got a novel. I mean, it's almost free, which means these risks can be taken. And